This topic has been buzzing around the fitness, wellness, psychology, all, medical, all the different realms of health and well-being.
The book is actually called Sacred Rest.
Sacred Rest, which will also pop into the comments there. So if you're interested in getting it, giving it as a present for the holidays to somebody, might make it.
Justine and I were talking. There's a lot in this book that I really like, but we were discussing how it is heavy on the Christianity.
She is a Christian, yes. We're going to be sticking to the research and, of course, popping in some of our own experiences as well. Can you see things?
No.
Oh.
I mean, I see things. Now I can see your frightful desktop with all of your tabs that you have.
How do I get... All right, everyone, just hold tight. Don't listen to Jen. That's not that many. That's
okay.
Like a normal amount. There, how's that?
That's great. That looks like a really relaxed cat.
I know. Are those cucumbers really, or did they? I think they photoshopped those.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really enjoying Instagram Reels with people dressing up their cats, though.
Yes, that's the only reels that should be allowed are the ones with animals. So let's get into this. This is this research comes from Sandra Dalton Smith, who is a medical doctor, a researcher, and an author. And you'll kind of see, I think it'll become clear why this is becoming so popular right now. And largely it is because people are chronically feeling tired, exhausted, burnt out, candle burning at both ends, etc. And of course, it's not completely a mystery why. We've been through a massive collective crisis due to the pandemic, and it is greatly affecting everyone.
Yeah, and she, she talked about how people were coming into her office and just feeling tired, feeling sore, just feeling, not great, and wanting some kind of diagnosis to explain why they were feeling that way. Like, I must have a chronic illness. There must be something going on. Like, a medical diagnosis was not an easy out, but at least like a simple explanation for why they were feeling like poop.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Where's my freaking mouse? So let's get into the first kind of rest. Of course, this one is like right up our alley because of the fitness aspect of it. But it's physical rest, which sounds sort of obvious, but I'll read the definition. Then Jen's got a really great quote that I'd like her to share too. But Sandra describes this as the chance to use the body in restorative ways to decrease muscle tension, reduce headaches, and promote higher quality sleep.
Yes. And also in this, in the book, she says what you do to your body and what you do with your body must balance to create equilibrium. And I kind of think of that like really strenuous, challenging exercise as something that you're kind of doing to your body, and maybe the more restorative things as something you're doing with your body. And also, like, it can speak to your relationship with exercise as well. And like, if you're doing it to your body, maybe it's more of a form of punishment, and that could be something to be explored.
Well, I think of it as like when we exercise, that's stress. It's a healthy kind of stress. We must stress our systems in order to keep them strong. But like your quote is saying, when we have, like, for example, like my brother does CrossFit, that's stressful for the body. He loves it and he feels great or whatever. But if he were not to then counter that with, his meditation or walking or, whatever, that could become problematic. He would maybe get out of balance there. So that's an interesting way of looking at it. So lacking physical rest is going to feel like sluggishness, aches and pains kind of daily. having a caffeine sugar dependency, especially in the afternoons, which I felt very called out during the quiz. There is a quiz to find out which rest that you are in need of. And
yeah, I put that in the comments.
Yeah, love taking quizzes. So much fun. And also frequent colds, which is an indication of a bit of a weakened immune system. And why it happens might seem kind of obvious. Like if you're not getting enough sleep or quality sleep, this is going to cause physical, the fatigue. And getting too much physical activity without enough recovery. Jen and I have definitely been there just through, getting really pumped up and like being really committed to our sports. And or for me, taking on too many group fitness classes is definitely something I've done in the past. And this week is an example of that. I'm sore like every day. And I'm very hungry all the time. And hopefully I don't get a cold. But definitely being mindful of that. And then this one was interesting, which is the opposite, which is you are sedentary and you're kind of staying in one physical position for too long through the day without getting up and getting the blood flowing.
Yeah. She talks a lot about that importance of circulation and blood flow and all of it. So,
which makes so much sense because when you're feeling sluggish and you're like sitting, this used to happen to me a lot. Again, during the pandemic, I was doing so much computer work. I wouldn't want to get up. I'd feel almost like stuck in my chair. But of course, once I stood up and even just like walked around a little bit, I'm like, okay, I feel like 10 million times better. So what to do if this is the kind of rest that you're in need of is, oh, wow, rest and refuel. What do you know? But definitely just making sure that if you are being really physically active or you're not getting enough sleep, both of those scenarios are going to require you to eat more. That's just how it is. And then active recovery, like stretching, yoga, walking.
And this is not like power walking, nope. This is like, and this could be like a 15-minute walk. This can be a short walk to just get the blood flowing. And I do think it's nice to recognize there are some people that are a little turned off by the idea of yoga, but like just doing a little stretching. I like to foam roll as well.
Foam rolling, totally. And prioritizing quality sleep. This is something that I have really made a big difference in my life in the last, it has been 10 days.
Yeah, look at you.
Which is, I'm very happy. I'm very proud of myself. I haven't had my phone in my room for 10 days and I'm reading to get to sleep and I'm definitely sleeping much better. I'm waking up feeling ready to get up a little bit more. Like it's not life changing, but I can tell it's making a positive difference. And it's really fun to watch my screen time reports every week going down. Nice. I've only gotten one, obviously, because it's only been 10 days, but I'm very excited. On Sunday, my phone is going to say, your screen time is decreased by this %. So that'll be really cool to see that.
In the meantime, my sleep hygiene has been terrible because I've had a sick dog and I've been sleeping on the couch. So
yeah, yes, totally. And I think one thing I wanted to mention that came up in my mind is like that this, like running the risk of this turning into this perfectionism thing, right? Mm-hmm. Or feeling like, oh, great. Well, I have a kid, so this doesn't even work for me or whatever. It's like, okay, wait. It doesn't have to be perfect. We can make these small adjustments and it can still make a difference. So the idea that we have to like do all of this and be in this perfect balance, that's a wellness industry. Just the darkness of the wellness industry is this perfectionism that comes into it. Like there's somebody out there who's like perfectly rested and like, we're trying to be that and it's just never going to happen.
Yeah. And this all or nothing, like, okay, maybe you had a few nights where you stayed up watching TV too late. That doesn't mean you like give up on the rest of the week or anything, Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of our intuitive eating messaging, which is like, one meal, one day, like it's not going to make or break the bank. Okay. And then the last two, making your workspace more ergonomically sound. This is a big change I made. I have a chair in the living room that I sat in for hours when the pandemic started doing all this work. Jen knows I effed up my body so bad. And I literally will never sit in that chair again to do work. I actually don't even sit in it ever. I'm just going to yell at the dogs very briefly. Hey, knock it off. No more. So I should see their faces. It's very funny. Yeah, so I got a desk and I got a freaking desk chair, making my workspace more ergonomically sound. So just finding ways to make yourself more comfortable, putting your body in a better position while you're at work. And then the hourly movement breaks, such a simple thing to just have an alarm that goes off and you just get up, do like this and a twist and a bend and shake your legs out and then sit back down. It's like not a big thing.
Move your head, flex your fingers and your toes, roll your shoulders.
Yeah, I really think what keeps a lot of people from doing this is they think it's like, well, I don't have time to do like a little workout in my day. And then on the other side, they think, well, those little things won't make a difference. So what's the point? Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like people get stuck. And again, that's the perfectionism of, well, either I'm going to do this big thing that seems so impactful, like a whole workout, but I'm not going to do this little thing, which is really doable, but, that's not going to make a difference. But it truly, truly does make a difference, for sure.
All right. I'm going to leave you solo for a second because I'm just going to let Ozzy out, but
I know we're all dealing with dogs.
I know you're going to lead everyone in the right direction.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for your confidence. So number 2 is mental. This is the ability. So when getting mental rest is the ability to quiet the cerebral chatter. So this is like the monkey brain going from one thought to the next thought to the next thought, and to focus on things that matter. So the ability to really hone our attention is part of getting mental rest. And what it feels like if you're not getting mental rest, or if you need this kind of rest, is being tired and wired at night. So this is, I'm sure many of you have experienced this. You're exhausted, but then when you lie down to actually sleep, you feel kind of anxious. Your mind is racing. Racing thoughts. That's the second thing. And during the day, things like forgetfulness, lack of concentration, being irritable, feeling overwhelmed, having mental fog, and then making mistakes, especially later in the day. So this wouldn't necessarily be so much of a morning thing, but as the day goes on, having these symptoms. So it's funny, Jen will probably come back to tell you.
We're going to talk about my pizza debacles.
Yes.
So we joke at the pizza place because every night at about 6:45, I'm like, I'm going to start making mistakes. Like I'm going to mess up a meat lover's pizza, and without fail. Although last week I went over and started doing the dishes around 6:45. I don't know if
that's actually not. Maybe we should just send you to do something like really that you don't have to think about. That's actually a pretty good idea. Be like, all right, 6:45, I'm in the dish pit.
Well, and a lot of the rest that we talk about in this it has to do with changing activities periodically. Yes. So yeah.
Yes. So I think this one's just so relatable, and it happens. This mental fatigue happens from overcommitting. So if you've got a to-do list that's like 5 pages and you look at your calendar and it is just booked. Also jumping from one task to the next without taking a break, saying yes to everything, just taking on way too much, which I've definitely been that person. And then lack of resources or support, right? We talk, the person that maybe is a single parent, working and attending school, trying to, parent their kids all at the same time, experiencing this mental fatigue. And that's why it's important to really let go of the perfectionist mindset about this. Cause like, if you're in that position, what are you gonna do? Like ship your kids off somewhere? No, of course not. That's not the solution. We just do our best to make some changes in a positive direction. So with the mental, what do we do if we need this kind of rest? What can we do? One of the things is to ask for help or delegate. And for people who are control freaks, getting freaky with that control, this is a tough one, right? Because it's like, well, if you can't get it, want it done right, you have to do it yourself, right? So that's also perfectionism coming up, right? So if you're thinking, well, I couldn't possibly, I'm the only one that can get this stuff done, maybe not. Maybe your partner could make dinner. It wouldn't be exactly what you would, you think the kids should eat, but hey, who cares? It's one night, just have them do it for you, right? And
I do want to recognize too that it is emotional labor to ask that of your family a lot, and that is a thing, and that's something to look into, like how can we get them to do these things without having to ask, but there may be times when you have to ask.
That's a great point, Jen. Scheduling in quiet time. And, I put meditation in there. I think that can feel really intimidating to people, like meditation. I'm not some kind of Zen Buddha, right? Meditation is literally just like reducing distractions as much as possible and sitting quietly and trying to focus on your breath or saying a mantra or counting to 500 backwards if you want, or forwards. It's really all it is just focusing the mind on one thing. That's all that meditation is. That's it. And we do the breath because everyone is breathing. So it's a very universal thing. But it can be really anything. You can even do it visually, like just staring into the distance at something, so that's one way to help with the mental, to get the mind to calm down. Also, turning off notifications that aren't necessary on all your devices is huge. Like, do you really need to hear every time an email? Like, you're probably checking your email all the time. Like, do you really need to hear that there's an email, or can you just, trust yourself to check it and probably it's going to be okay? And then Jen, you added this on the evaluating draining activities and picking a good time to do that activity.
Yeah, like you might want to do those when your reserves are a little bit higher. So maybe that means you do your emails earlier in the morning or menial tasks. It can also mean blocking off those, trying to have time limits on those things that do drain you, whether that's like news. I have a lot of clients that actually really try to limit the amount of news they consume. They want to stay informed, but there's also a time when it just leads to anxiety. So that would be something like, I can do 30 minutes of news a day. So blocking those types of things off too.
Yeah. And on that note, I have time limits set into my phone for websites and apps. So you can have time limits for apps, which I have for Instagram and Facebook. And you can have time limits for websites. So where I read my news, there is literally a time limit on it. And it will, granted, I'm an adult, so if I want to override it, you can, but it comes up and it says you have reached your time limit. It's definitely a really great speed bump at the very least. So if you need a little more discipline than just kind of well, I'm not supposed to be on, this very long, just Google how to set up time limits for websites on my iPhone or on my Android or whatever, and do it, because it's really made a big difference for me.
Nice. It's a good idea.
Sensory. I've
got some sensory overload.
Sensitivities. Sensory sensitivities.
Oh my goodness.
So what is it? The opportunity. So getting this kind of rest means you have the opportunity to downgrade the endless onslaught of sensory input received from electronics, fragrances, and background noise. Yeah. What are some of your
talks about in the book, even the clothing that you wear and the feeling of it.
Ooh.
And I also think it was kind of a little bit of a jolt when we went from pandemic life of being in really cozy clothes to having to put on jeans, and the way that those feel versus sweatpants. It's not as pleasant.
Absolutely. I'm happy that I am so much more just intolerant of tight clothing now. I can't believe how tight my clothes were before. I just, anyway, can't deal with it. So what does it feel like if you're lacking this kind of rest? Annoyed, agitated, I feel bad for Derek a little bit, and angry.
Why? Because I'm like that.
No, I'm joking, but no, I just mean, just having Ozzy be sick and like you're living with someone and you're like, it's probably just, I don't know. To me, it feels like when I feel this kind of sensory sensitivity, like I'm being overwhelmed, I'm almost on like a bit of a hair trigger.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I don't have kids, but being around them can be like that, like overwhelming. There's just never quiet, and they're crawling all over you and they're yelling and they're making noises and it's just never. So it does like you're, what was I gonna say? You're just like at capacity sooner.
Yeah. I think that's right. So why does it happen? Obvious, a sensory overload, right? So everybody's capacity for this is different. And this might not be a rest that you like resonates with you, because some people aren't very sensitive to this kind of stuff. But you might be, and you just don't know it. And that's kind of interesting to find out too, where you actually start to notice like, oh, I'm feeling really agitated, irritable. And it might be because you just need to have more quiet, or you need to just close your eyes, not necessarily sleep, but just lie back and relax your, visual input, etc. So what to do? Scheduling in sensory breaks is great. So if you have like noise canceling headphones, it was a great thing. Obviously that's a little expensive. Like regular headphones with some just soothing sounds or music, or even like a podcast, listening to a story. Sleep mask, like just blocking out the light, super helpful. Scheduling in quiet time. And Jen, you did this for a long time, where you were scheduling in meditation and having that quiet time.
Yeah, mornings were my morning routine was very awesome.
And then again, just the notifications thing. So like hearing the ding of your phone. I mean, I think there are studies around that. I mean, there are studies around what happens in the brain when we hear a notification on the phone. And it stimulates like a physiological response in the body and the mind. And then limiting screen time. Obviously, we should all be doing that. And but some more simple thing like lowering the monitor brightness, which is very obvious. And I didn't think of that.
Yeah. And then just visually, every 20 minutes, taking 20 seconds to look at something in the distance. So your eyes go from like focusing in on close up to having an opportunity to expand.
So smart. And then adding sensory input that you enjoy, which is really interesting. I was saying that I have this little diffuser that changes color, and it's like smells nice, and it makes like this really nice like sound. And I really enjoy that. Also having plants around, like I really like to see green. It's like very visually nice for me. What about you, Jen?
Sensory things that I enjoy. That's a great question. I really like very limited stuff. Like I don't like many odors at all. I'm like no scent, no sound, low light. So not like a big like candle person or anything. So I think for me it's less of adding in and more of taking away that I find
minimizing. Love it.
Yeah.
So this will be the last one we're going to go over tonight. We'll finish the rest next week, which is creative rest. So creative rest is the experience of allowing beauty to inspire awe and liberate wonder. We did not write that. That's from the author. But Jen, can you explain creative, like what, for people who are like, okay, I'm not like in a band, like how does this relate to me?
This isn't creative work. This is just that like, it's almost like just seeing beauty in the world, and maybe stuff that kind of inspires curiosity, wonder, all those words. And
it's like I find it energizing. An example is like when every time Jen and I hear somebody in our field do like a lecture, like a seminar, kind of like revamps our own excitement in the field that we're in.
It's inspiring.
It's
Yeah,
inspiring.
that makes sense. Yeah.
And then we're like, wait a minute, we could be doing that. Maybe we could try this. Or like, did you see that? Or how he did this? Or how she said that? Yeah, it's such a great example. So what it feels like if we are lacking this kind of rest is we are feeling uninspired. We're feeling a lack of innovation or imagination. We don't feel like we have any good ideas. Like we're just kind of like dry, like the well is dry. And we feel maybe undeserving, which might be more of a deeper layer that we don't have a lot of awareness of. Or like our work doesn't have any value. Like we're just going in, getting a paycheck, and it's just whatever. Yeah. So why does this happen? So one of the reasons can be that we have drained our creative well dry without replenishing it. And this is definitely something Jen and I think both experienced when the pandemic hit and we took all of our clients basically online. And suddenly we need a platform for this. Like, okay, we need to be like, should we be marketing this? There was all of this. Suddenly so much problem solving, so much learning, so much imagination. And wait, how am I going to do this? I got to figure this out. Right. So this isn't about me painting a picture. It's about us figuring things out, which requires a creativity. Right. Mm-hmm. So too much of that drains it. And then we're not exposing ourselves to what is inspiring or gives us a sense of wonder or possibility. And Jen, you put this one on the list, which is over prioritizing other people's needs.
Yeah. So that can be, where is that one there? Creativity. Okay. Yeah. So, talking yourself out of self-care as if like you're not deserving of it. Mm-hmm. And even like self-destructive behavior also can go under that as well.
Yeah.
And and that was surprising to me because I maybe would have thought that would go under emotional or social or a different kind of rest. Yeah.
But this makes sense. So like, because being uninspired is like, I don't know. I know that feeling, I know that feeling of like just being like barren kind of, and it makes you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah.
Like
when you're, I'll just take care of other people. They're worth it more than I am.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. So what do we do if we need this kind of rest? Be around what you find beautiful, inspirational, awe-inducing. And that is so broad because it's really different for everyone. Nature, art, music, books, dance, science, food, cooking, I don't know, just anything. And then also scheduling in, which is a theme throughout all of these kinds of rest, scheduling in breaks during the workday to maybe get a little boost of this creative rest in the sense of maybe listening to some music, maybe, or a podcast from somebody that is like, that you kind of look up to maybe, or find very interesting. Staring at nature, just looking park somewhere, stare at Lake Champlain.
Yeah.
Don't stare at a person because that's weird.
But if it's a beautiful person.
Well, yeah. Then it's okay. So this one is interesting. I'd be curious to see how people, feel about this one because it's a little bit of like, okay, but I think it might be one of the more important ones that is much less obvious.
Yeah, for me, I really noticed this happen in the change of seasons when I go from spending so much time outside to being inside significantly more. And I can really feel this a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons why like the late fall is so challenging.
Such a great point. So between now and then, go take the quiz. So you can figure out what kind of rest you are in need of, and just knowing that it changes season to season, situationally, right? Like if you have a sick dog, or maybe, you've got a kid homesick, right? That's probably going to change your answers as opposed to, 6 months from now, and how things will be. So just keeping that in mind, but I still think it's going to be very interesting for everybody to see that.
I do want to tell everyone Oz is okay, in case you're worrying.
Great.
We had a little scare, but he's doing okay.
Yeah. He was in great spirits when I fed him and everything. Like, it was, yeah.
Well, because he loves eating.
Yeah, no, he was excited about the eating thing. But anyway, yeah. Aging doggies. A lot of people have been there. All right. Well, this is great. And we will catch you next week to finish this up. And in the meantime, take the quiz. Well, let's get into it. We are finishing up the 7 kinds of rest. And we went through physical, mental, sensory, and creative rest in our previous video. And now we are going to get into emotional, social, and spiritual rest. Emotional rest, freedom to authentically express feelings and let go of people-pleasing behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most people, well, I don't want to make assumptions, but I know you and I have very different personalities. Both of us scored high on the quiz for needing this kind of rest, which is sort of interesting. Because Jen and I have done personality kind of tests before, and we rarely share a lot of in common, actually. So it's interesting that this is one, even given our different personalities.
Yeah, I just think if you interact with people on a regular basis, that you're going to have a deficit here, because whether you're coaching or working in a restaurant or you're managing people, like you can't.
I think about hairdressers too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. You just can't truly be yourself. So and you're doing fitness classes, and I've got my personal training clients. So I think it's less of a personality thing and more of just like the nature of what we do for work.
Yeah, totally. So what it feels like if you're lacking this kind of rest, I like to, what I thought of with this was like the permagrin, like pretending or putting on a happy face where you're just like this, and it just but some more subtle things too would be an overactive self-critic, possibly overreacting to small not indiscretions, but like if you make like a mistake, overreacting, which is definitely something that I do. I actually had that this morning. I forgot I changed a password and I thought that I had written it down and I didn't. And I was like, how could I do this? Like this, it was so, and it's like not that hard to change a password, but I felt like, oh my gosh, such a total doofus. Self-doubt, a lack of confidence, over apologizing, and feeling the need to over explain. That's one. I think, Jen, you and I have both kind of actively worked on that one, the like not over explaining.
Yeah, for anything, if you make a mistake trying to over explain, or like
needing to say no to
when
something.
You say no, like what needing to explain the reasons. Yeah. I mean, it's like working, I hate to bring everything back to working at a pizza place, but like I messed something up, I'm not gonna be like, well, it was because of this and this and this. And it's like, you know what? I messed up. That happens. Like
totally. Yeah. And I think too, one thing that I found as I've become a little more aware of my emotions and my thoughts and everything, it doesn't really feel that much better to over explain, even if something's like not your fault and you're like, well, I need to really make this clear that this wasn't my fault. Even when in the process of like putting it on the other person, that also like doesn't actually feel great. And it can be it can really feel like a weight is lifted. Like you just are like, my bad, like yep, I put the sausage on the veggie, and I'll make another one. And sorry about that. Instead of like, well, this was written weird or whatever. I'm just, again, using the pizza place example. But I think it's a good one. So yeah, this idea of almost, and I think too, this, and maybe I hope I'm not on too much of a tangent. This also plays a little bit into saying like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's okay to do that.
Right. And not saying, trying to explain or like getting out of your depth, trying to like almost like being so helpful that you might actually get into territory that you really have no business being in because and that's that people pleasing, right? Like somebody asks you something and you want to deliver so badly that you might actually start talking about something where you're like, this is really not in my like wheelhouse. And that happens, especially in the fitness world. People would ask us all kinds of questions
with
about diet and injuries
and autoimmune diseases and like all kinds of stuff. Yeah. That are A, beyond my scope of practice, and B, beyond my knowledge.
Yeah, it's just all not. And I think that we had to learn in order to be ethical to say, I don't know the answer to that. Or even if I maybe had an inkling, it's not appropriate or ethical, even if I feel like I know the answer, for me to divulge that information. Right. So these things, and I say that's just to say like these things almost take a little practice, and maybe something like over apologizing is something that you do that you might not even know that you do it until you bring a little bit of awareness and kind of spotlight like, oh, is this me? Am I maybe doing this?
I don't know. I think if you're someone that says sorry a lot, someone has probably in your life said to you, you don't need to apologize so much.
Yeah. And I think it's becoming a common, just like kind of women's empowerment thing in general, of like, you don't owe anyone like an apology for just not wanting to do something or not having the time or the energy to do something.
I mean, I do think that's a big one. Like if you say no to something, you don't need to explain why.
Certainly. I mean, I think like context matters. Like if I were to like not have gone to your birthday dinner or something, I probably, just because of the nature of our relationship, would have needed to like, or else that would have been strange. But certainly professionally, and I do think a lot of this emotional, the rest that we did emotionally is largely due to work. Like we don't, for work stuff, like that's not necessary to always get into this deep reason why.
I was also thinking coming up with the holidays that it can be emotionally tiring because you're around family and maybe you have to avoid certain topics, or you're trying to keep the peace. So I feel like recognizing that this can be an emotionally draining time.
Totally. So why does emotional rest get depleted, or emotional energy get depleted? So too much time with people that require emotional or emotional something. There's a word that's missing in there. We feel, or people that we just feel we can't be totally honest or authentic around. Now, this might include people that you love, like very much. Like for you, just right now, it could be Oz, like where you love him, like you really love him, but he's requiring a lot of your like energy and your emotional, like this emotional output. I mean, you can be honest and authentic around him, I guess. But,
yeah, or you could have a friend going through a hard time.
Children.
And I was like this when I was getting a divorce. I wouldn't have wanted to listen to me. I was in this loop, like just repeating myself and always bringing the conversation back to myself. And so it might be somebody that it might not be like an all the time thing, but there are times when that person is draining.
Yeah. And children. So anyone that we are caretakers of. So another few reasons why this can happen in a little more specific terms is if we are somebody that tends to compare ourselves to other people, and this includes a lot of social media use, can be emotionally draining. And being around negative people. We're definitely not suggesting like ban anyone from your life or anything like that, but maybe just thinking about it.
I mean, I do have one or two people in my life that I have stopped being in contact with because they drained me so much. Just wasn't a good fit.
Yeah. And I think that it's also like one thing that I've noticed, because there was only ever one person that I was friends with that I was like that I kind of like broke up with years ago. But I think what I've noticed is that as I have put up boundaries, those people tend to just like not seek me out as much. Because if you're a really captive audience to somebody that's constantly like, oh my God, and then this, and oh, then they're going to want to talk to you. But if you kind of have healthy boundaries with that person, then I think that they kind of will naturally stop seeking you out because you're not a captive audience.
Yeah. So it may be somebody that's been in your life for a really long time too. So like if you new acquaintances, you're getting good at those boundaries, but maybe there's just somebody that's been around for a while. That can be tough. Yeah.
So true. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Like we're not saying like the only people allowed in your life are positive people,
because some people, like when they're so positive and they discount any of your struggles, that's a whole other thing.
Toxic positivity. Yeah. So what can we do to get emotional rest? Kind of obviously spending time with people that you can be really authentic around. So this might be a therapist, depending on the situation that you're in. If for whatever reason you don't feel like you have those safe people in your life where you can really say what's on your mind, what's in your heart, and speak your truth, then you might need to hire somebody to be that earpiece for you. That's just so flipping important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we talked about in this one, another thing that happens is we tend to, what did they call it? Emotional contagion, where we kind of like mimic the people that we're around. So that kind of goes back to negative people. And when people smile, you smile. So like unconsciously we're mirroring those people. So
yes.
Keeping that in mind and kind of taking an inventory of how people do affect you. You may not have connected hanging out with some person with being fatigued emotionally. So just starting to make those connections.
Yeah. And I think that this varies person to person, but if you're a highly empathetic or very sensitive person, it can be incredibly impactful. And I was going to say, what came up for me with what you just said, Jen, was back in the day before I was, discovered intuitive eating and really started taking care of my mental health and all of that, being around women who did a lot of like body bashing and like diet talking really fueled like my disordered eating and my body image, just my body image dysmorphia was like heightened by being around women who, and I'm not blaming them because I'm sure I participated at that time as well, but we got together and we would almost like, it was almost like this frenzy kind of where we were like feeding this fire, of like, oh, well, you think that's bad. Well, listen to this, or like, I'm going to do this. And it really, so that's just an example of that. What would you call it?
Emotional contagion,
where you might go into a situation, not even thinking about, let's just say like your body, but then your friend starts complaining, oh, I got on the scale. Oh, my pants are tight. I really got to hit the gym. Oh, can you believe I ate that? Oh, I shouldn't be doing that. And suddenly you're like, I'm not feeling very good about myself all of a sudden. So just an example and roping it back around to a lot of what we talk about in this group, which is that body image stuff. So
I think it can also be good to like seek out new friends, which is kind of like a little stressful. But if you start meeting people and you're like, oh, this is somebody I really do feel like I could be myself around, like, like making some time to maybe make some new friends, acquaintances.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you haven't made a new friend in adulthood, that would be maybe a cool goal because you're probably pretty different. Like, I don't know, Jen, you were in your late 30s. I was in my early 30s when you and I met. Like you are definitely an example of like a friend I made in adulthood. and yeah, I mean, you're so valuable in my life, and you know me so like it's just it's a very different relationship that we have. And it also allows me to be more authentic because you don't have those old stories of me, like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I don't know what high school Justine was like.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And when you spend time with people, like I spent time with my friend Kate, who's known me since I was like very, very young, which is very valuable in its own way. But probably I fall into, perhaps I'm just, kind of putting it out there, like maybe I act a little differently, or maybe there are things maybe that I can feel that I can talk to her about that I'm like, well, Jen wouldn't really understand this because she didn't know me then. But there are probably also things that I feel much more comfortable talking to you about because I feel like, she sees me as this certain way and you see me a different way. So valuable. Also, journaling, which is a really great way to get rested emotionally, especially if you feel like there's some stuff that you don't want to say or you can't talk about with a trusted person. Just getting those thoughts and feelings out onto a page is so valuable. It sounds so trite, like journaling. I totally get that, but it is so valuable. I cannot
have journals on journals on journals.
I know.
Because sometimes I've had an easier time expressing myself that way than verbally with people anyway. So
yes, so true. All right. Well, moving on. We did spend quite a bit of time on this one, but it's an important one. Cool. So social. Yeah, this one I'm not going to lie. I think I said to you, Jen, I'm like, I wasn't totally getting the difference between emotional and social rest because they seem very similar to me. But I
think that isolation, loneliness piece is different for this.
Good point.
The other one might just mean like feeling tired, and maybe we've got more of a focus on that self-doubt. And this one is loneliness, isolation, kind of like a what was the word I wanted to use there? Just kind of like a blah, like lack of motivation, that kind of feeling. Yeah,
such a great point. So what does it feel like? So a few different ways that this can arise and can kind of signal you that you need social rest. Being pulled in a million directions. So maybe you have a job or you take on a role in your personal or familial life where you are in charge of like everything. Feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you can't get any time to yourself, and like your phone's constantly beeping and people are kind of like, hey, all the time. And then also feelings of isolation. So this idea that you can feel lonely in a crowded room came up for me, that even though you might be surrounded by people and on the phone all day and emailing all day, you feel alone and isolated and lonely in like in who you are. And also a feeling of not really belonging or like not being seen or understood is also part of this social fatigue, which is really interesting. So what can make this happen? Too much time with people that drain you or like need something from you, or being in situations a lot where you have to be in charge and managing everyone around you. Too much or too little social engagement, depending on who you are. And over relying on virtual social connections over real life social connections, because we don't get the same physiological response from like texting with someone or messaging with someone online or even Zooming as we do when we are literally in the physical presence of another human being. So just not to say that, of course, like I talk to my mom on the phone a lot because she's not around, and that's perfectly fine. But so it's not about taking out the virtual social connections that you have, but just making sure that you're also getting meaningful connection in person.
Yes. Yeah, so what you can do is spend more time with people who don't need anything from you. Once again, might meet a therapist. I kind of think like it was nice as a trainer to have my own trainer, to just have somebody to tell me what to do. But like I've always
Yes.
found it like nice to be in those situations where I'm like, oh, I'm not in charge of this, somebody else is in charge of this. Or like even like thinking about dating, like maybe it's nice to have somebody that makes decisions, like when I'm choosing a partner, like, if I'm tired of having to make choices all the time.
That is such a freaking great example. Is to just take the onus off of you. And that might mean addressing some like control issues, right? Because if you are always in situations where you're in charge and you're in control, that's probably not an accident, even if you're not. And this is something that I've realized a lot lately. And I've made massive changes in my life in order to balance this out, is that the way that my entire career was oriented, every single way that I like make money and like interact with people were situations where I was always in charge. And that was all this dynamic of like me, like being the one. And it was really exhausting me. So that's a big change that I've just made personally, where I'm putting myself in many more situations where I am not the person in charge. And it's been, I think, really, really helpful for me. And definitely I feel more rested. I don't feel so burnt out. So spending time with people that restore and revive you. So I love this example when one of the people in our intuitive eating course goes to swing dance. And like, this is kind of right, like where when you get done spending time with this group of people, you're like, whew, like, I feel like my cup has been refilled. Like, this is like awesome. You're feeling great. You're feeling energized and revived, versus like, if you get out of like a team meeting where you ran the meeting and you're like delegating you're like, okay, you got to do this. And then everyone's going to like have to get back in touch with you to tell you that they did the thing that you asked, right? That might not be a social situation that is like reviving you and giving you a lot of energy. So that is an interesting point, because when you think about social rest, you're like, oh, well, you just need to not be around people. But that's actually not really the recommendation. It's just discerning between social situations that rejuvenate you and restore your energy versus social situations that deplete you. So yeah, more face-to-face time with people who fill that cup for you, that aren't taking, but that are giving. Or it's obviously could also be like synergistic. And especially, yeah, like I do like my hip hop class where, I feel tired afterwards, but in a really good way. So yeah, you got to have a little self-awareness.
Sometimes this takes a little work because you have to make the plans to see someone in person. And sometimes you don't want to make that step.
And let me tell you what, like this, I told Jen this, on Sunday, I did not want to go to that hip hop class at all. Like, I was like, just want to stay home. But it was like, I knew, right then, like the parent part has to come out and say, honey, you probably feel a lot better if you just went and danced a little, and I went and it was freaking awesome. So sometimes we do have to give ourselves a little push.
All right. Spiritual. This one was a little tricky because we're trying to maybe like make it less Christian and more open to all beliefs here.
Secular.
Talk about this. Secular.
So the author is Christian, and she does talk a lot about her relationship with God and Jesus and all of that. And that might resonate with you, especially if you buy the book, certainly. But we did take her words and change them a little bit to make them more accessible for people who are not religious. So what is spiritual rest? So spiritual rest is resting in a sense that we are part of something greater than ourselves. So that sounds like kind of ambiguous, but let's keep going. So what it feels like, sometimes knowing what it like isn't, it helps us know what it is. So what it feels like if you're lacking this kind of rest, or you're depleted in this way, it's going to feel like very nihilistic, like nothing really matters. Feeling a lack of purpose and a lack of connection. So like my life really has no meaning. The work I do doesn't matter. Feeling like you don't belong, helplessness, hopelessness, or lacking emotion, right? Feeling very numb, feeling apathetic. And I mean, certainly I think.
I mean, isn't that just how you feel in December in Vermont?
Yeah. Yeah. The seasonal affective disorder, real bad. And like World War III is looming, right? So I think that definitely this can, when I think of this, one thing that comes up is sometimes if I consume too much news.
Mm. Yeah, because you feel like you can't do anything to make any difference. It's just there's no action to be taken and you feel hopeless, helpless. Yeah.
Yeah. And like there's, for me, like, I mean, I do consider myself a spiritual person, and I do have a connection to what I feel is like a greater energy or whatever, however you want to put it. And I can reconnect to that if I'm feeling that hopelessness, or like, oh my God, the world is freaking ending, and oh, it's so overwhelming and there's nothing I can do. I can rest in this knowing and understanding of this greater being or energy or the universe or God or however you want to put it. Now that doesn't have to be everyone's experience. It can be a little bit more grounded than that, or however you want to put it. But why this might happen is unfulfilling relationships, or having an unfulfilling occupation. So you're kind of just getting your paycheck, not feeling any connection to the work you're doing or the people that you're doing it with. That being said, I also know that there are people who like, they do just go to their job for a paycheck, and that's okay. Like,
yeah, I mean, outside of that, there's the community connection. You can see, like, you can seek things outside of that, but you can recognize if that job isn't fulfilling that part of your life, acknowledge that.
Yes. And you need to supplement it with other things. Yeah. So this lack of a community, which again, I think that this is something that's happening in the US in particular, in the West in particular, as we become more dependent on, virtual reality, that we don't, people aren't doing community events. I mean, it's not just like literal church attendance that's down, but just attendance within community events in general is down. Going to, a potluck at the town hall in your town or something like that, that's not, we're just not going out and making those connections as much as we once were, because we believe we're finding that fulfillment online. But we know from the previous slide that is not going to, you can't use that to replace actual human connection. So
or you feel like you don't have time for it. I'm sure there's some people that maybe had a community and then they had kids and got a little busier, and you kind of like put that need to the wayside to take care of your family. So it might be making sure that you do carve out some time to find a community to get involved with. I think for us, like, we had the gym community, so we did have a kind of a good community at work, and then we've found community through sports.
Yeah.
So dragon boating, tennis, pickleball. So that's been really nice. But there can be other interests. There could be book clubs and things like that, or just making sure you have like a group of friends you get together once a month or something.
Absolutely. And this is such an important, I don't know, this one is very important. And yeah, I mean, finding some kind of like spiritual connection. I mean, again, I don't love that word, because I think it can really make some people feel like left out, but it can be just like finding awe and beauty in things, right? Kind of a little similar to that creative rest, where you go out and you just kind of like commune with like nature, or, watch people playing music or whatever it might be. And this is
something
also
something bigger than yourself, so you don't get all wrapped up in yourself.
yeah, and feel like it's all on you, or that you're totally alone, which is just like probably the worst feeling that a human can feel, because we are social creatures and we are designed to be together. We need each other around to survive.
It's funny, like speaking of these little things of awe. So last night I got home from grocery shopping and I had seen a thing online about this Jeep parade. And like I saw some people waiting on the end of the road. I'm like, oh, what's going on? And I got out of my car and I heard some honking, and it was just this parade of Jeeps with lights on. And it was just so cool. And it was just like nice to see the holiday spirit and see all those people that got together and organized it. So like that was like a random, experience of awe and wonder. Like.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you feel like hopeful almost, because I
Yeah.
think that we get this impression, especially from the news and stuff, that like we are irreconcilably divided as a country and like whatever. But then when you actually step outside your door and like look at, something like that, like a parade or whatever, it's like, oh, like it's like we're okay,
There are some good things happening in the world too.
Yes, totally. Yeah. So that wraps up the 7 kinds of rest, and why, even though you might be sleeping perfectly fine, you are still feeling tired. So.
And I do feel like, we've got high achievers and perfectionists, and, you and I have had our own things with that. So it can be easy to look at this list and be like, oh my God, there's so much different kinds of rest I need. And like, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So you could just actually, like, you could pick one thing to focus on, or you could pick one thing to do that covers many. Because I do think, like, she mentions this in one of her podcasts, the author, but going for a walk covers a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And I've been thinking about this too, because I'll often choose to take a nap. And I'm like, oh, maybe like I do feel like I could benefit from more time outside. So, maybe instead of choosing a nap more regularly, I'll choose a walk, and that gets the creative rest, and that gets a sensory rest, and that also helps with physical rest in like more of an active recovery way.
All right, everybody. We are ending this live, and we'll see you soon.
Talk to you later.